to a brand new episode of Law and Batting Order. I'm your host, Tony Oyakostas. Here are some quick hits from the past week. Well, the Dwightmare is over for now. After nearly a week of back-and-forth discussions between the Brooklyn Nets and the Orlando Magic, the teams were unable to strike a deal that would have sent Dwight Howard to the Nets. Even though the Nets and Magic included the Clippers and the Cavaliers in the trade talks, not a single trade proposal was accepted. So the Nets keep their big man Brook Lopez and preserve several draft picks. But the Dwight Howard sweepstakes is still in progress, as the Houston Rockets are believed to be working out a trade for the All-Star Center. The MLB All-Star Game festivities took place at Kansas City this year, and the events were great. Prince Fielder stole the show on Monday as he beat Toronto Blue Jays outfielder Jose Bautista in the Home Run Derby. Then on Tuesday, the All-Star Game took place. Fans, particularly Mets fans, were up in arms when National League manager Tony La Russa decided to not start the game with R.A. Dickey. He instead started Matt Cain to square off against 2011 AL MVP and Cy Young winner Justin Verlander. The game still went the NL's way as the National League beat the American League 8-0. The AL had no shot against NL pitching, including R.A. Dickey, who pitched a scoreless sixth inning. San Francisco Giants outfielder Melky Cabrera was named the MVP and the National League won home field advantage in this year's World Series. Alas, a deal has been made. On Friday, the New Orleans Saints signed quarterback stud Drew Brees to a brand new 5-year, $100 million contract. This new deal comes after the Saints placed a franchise tag on Drew Brees, and he threatened to hold out of training camp if the Saints did not offer him a new deal. In this new deal, Brees will earn a guaranteed $60 million, and the icing on the cake is that in his first contract year, Brees will earn $40 million. The Saints' offseason has been marred by the news of their bounty fund, so to strike this deal assures Saints fans that their strong offense is back to compete this season and beyond. Today's Order in the Court will be discussing the Freeh Report and the ramifications that we could see at Penn State University. For today's episode, we welcome back Scott Andresen, a good friend here at Law and Batting Order. He's an entertainment and sports attorney based in Chicago, and he also teaches sports law at Northwestern University. Scott, welcome back. How's it going?
Hey, Tony. How are you?
Very well. And, I don't know where we can dive in from here. This whole Jerry Sandusky Penn State scandal has been really quite the headline these past few months, and, the Freeh Report really just adds more insult to injury here. Here we have, sitting on a Thursday afternoon, or Thursday morning rather, we have the Freeh Report being released by Louis Freeh, who was the former FBI director. It contains 267 pages of text, collected from multiple documents. Over 400 interviews were collected and they occurred in order to complete the report. And obviously, the most general assessment that was made in this specific report was that former Penn State University Athletic Director Tim Curley, former Penn State University President Graham Spanier, former Vice President Gary Schultz, and the late Joe Paterno essentially knew about Jerry Sandusky's behavior, concealed that information, and never even told authorities or any other Penn State administration. So I had an opportunity to peruse it, but you had more time to check it out. From your time in checking it out and keenly looking at all the details of the report, what portions of the report really stuck out to you and really raised a red flag?
Well, looking at the report, the entire thing is a red flag. It's 267 pages of cautionary tale. Some of the more interesting sound bites from the Freeh Report, are his quote that our most saddening and sobering finding is a total disregard for the safety and welfare of Sandusky's child victims by the most senior leaders at Penn State, which obviously are Paterno, Spanier, Curley, and Schultz.
Right.
Freeh goes on to say that these four individuals failed to protect against a child sexual predator harming children for over a decade, and then also went on to call their conduct and their disregard for the child victims callous and shocking. This is some pretty strong language. Freeh then goes on to say, in order to avoid the consequences of bad publicity, Spanier, Schultz, Paterno, and Curley repeatedly concealed critical facts relating to Sandusky's child abuse. He then went on to say in the press conference that he held after the issue of the report that Paterno was an integral part of this active decision to conceal. I think that's, I guess, one of the most shocking and disappointing things for me personally. With all the issues that college athletics have had over the past decades, the one place that people always seem to look for somebody that was doing things the right way was Joe Paterno. And I think everybody pretty much put him on a pedestal, and now it's painfully clear that not only was this not warranted, I mean, he was quite literally the exact opposite of what we thought he was. Furthermore, one of the more, I guess, shocking and disturbing things that come out of the report is the complete and utter power wielded by Paterno over Penn State and the Happy Valley community. Mm-hmm. University presidents, athletic directors, I mean, everybody kind of bowed to his prowess, and he ruled with absolute power.
Yeah, and we're starting to see now all these arguments being made that Joe Paterno's statue in front of the football stadium should be taken down. We've already seen Nike take action in taking down Joe Paterno's name at the Child Care Center on their Nike campus. But, I wanted to show our viewers at home the headline, and I'm not sure if the camera's going to pick it up. I'm pretty sure now, yeah. The headline on the New York Times reads, "Abuse Scandal Inquiry Damns Paterno and Penn State." And you know what? Quite literally, this does, I think it does more than damn the administrators. You could say that it marred their reputation, tarnished it, whatever the word you want to use. That's essentially what happened. But, as of now, we know that Tim Curley and Gary Schultz have been charged with perjury and failure to report child abuse in the case of Jerry Sandusky, yet we haven't seen that charge or any sort of charge, criminal charge, come out with Graham Spanier. So I want to propose a two-part question, and let me ask part one first. While this is an independent report that Freeh conducted in this report, do you see this 267-page document as enough evidence for the state prosecutor's office to add additional charges against Curley and Schultz for concealing the information about Jerry Sandusky's predatory behavior?
Well, as you mentioned, the only two figures currently charged in the alleged cover-up are Curley and Schultz. They were charged last fall with perjury and then failure to report suspected child abuse, and are currently awaiting trial. I think their last hearing in the issue was last week.
Right.
Spanier has yet to be charged, but a grand jury is continuing to investigate, and I would be thoroughly shocked if he's not charged on a number of crimes. When one looks at the Freeh Report, it reads like a prosecution case for a child endangerment charge against Spanier, Paterno, Curley, and Schultz. Obviously, Paterno's passed away and won't be charged. To that end, I don't think that there's any doubt that the Pennsylvania State Prosecutor's Office, as well as civil attorneys for the victims, the U.S. Department of Education, the NCAA, the Big Ten, and others, are going to be using the Freeh Report as a launching point for their own investigations into prosecuting current charges that they might have pending against Curley and Schultz, and pursuing additional charges against those individuals and or Spanier for the atrocities that occurred at Penn State.
Right. So now, in that same light, do you suspect this document will have, maybe not necessarily be the focal point, but would you suspect this will be the first step for the prosecutor's office to charge Graham Spanier, since he hasn't been criminally charged at all? And if so, what would you expect those charges to be?
Yeah, I mean, as I stated earlier, the Freeh Report very much reads like a prosecution case for a child endangerment charge against Spanier. And it actually quickly brings to mind another recent situation which happened coincidentally in Pennsylvania, in which a former top official in the Pennsylvania or the Philadelphia Archdiocese, an individual named Monsignor Lynn, was convicted of child endangerment this past June for allowing a suspected pedophile priest to be around children. Now, this Monsignor Lynn faces 7 years in prison as a result of this conviction, which was only for a single count of child endangerment. So as this applies to Spanier, I would be extremely shocked if similar charges were not leveled against Spanier for child endangerment. Though I honestly don't know whether it would be, multiple charges for, a charge for each victim, or if it would just be a single count of child endangerment that would apply to the totality of the circumstances.
Right. So now let's take a look at Joe Paterno. And, like I said, this undoubtedly tarnished his reputation, his coaching legacy, everything that we've known Joe Paterno to be. And as you said earlier, he's been known to be somewhat of the complete opposite of what we've now found out of Jerry Sandusky. We always intrinsically thought he was this good guy humanitarian, but from a legal standpoint, at least criminally, Joe Paterno, do you think he would be on the same boat as Curley, Schultz, and Spanier had he still been alive? And, what do you think went wrong with Joe Paterno that made him not report Sandusky's actions? The Freeh Report states that he didn't want to ruin the football program's legacy. Do you think this was his only motivation?
Well, to answer the first question, I don't think that there's any doubt that Paterno would have been charged, had he not passed away in January this year. What drove Joe Paterno? I think there was a number of factors that drove him. I think to some degree he was driven by the desire to break the all-time coaching record for wins. This would seem to jive by the fact that, at least from an outsider, it looked like he was collecting wins from a press box for at least the last 5 years of his career. Maybe I'm a jaded Illinois alum, but it just seemed like he wasn't really coaching. He was just collecting victories.
Right.
I think Joe was driven by his own vision of his legacy, and he apparently wasn't going to risk the potential harm to his legacy by doing the right thing and outing a monstrous pedophile that was operating under his watch. Actually, quite the opposite occurred. The facts are coming to light that not only did Paterno not take any affirmative action to out Sandusky, he actually took affirmative actions to cover up Sandusky's conduct.
Yeah.
When some of the administrators from Penn State actually apparently wanted to do the right thing and reported to child welfare and to some other agencies, there was a conversation with Paterno amongst one of them, and 24 hours later, the plan had been completely reversed. Mm-hmm. I think at some level, Joe is driven by personal greed. A fact that seems to be reinforced as recently as today by a New York Times article that came out talking about Paterno's, extracted golden parachute that was negotiated in the months after the grand jury began investigating Sandusky. Though one can wonder aloud if the payments that were made by, approved by Spanier were as much hush money as anything, it just seems like Joe was always going to get what Joe thought Joe was entitled to.
Yeah.
And then, at the end of the day, I think Joe Paterno is a textbook example of the phrase that absolute power corrupts absolutely. The facts are becoming painfully clear that Paterno was a feudal lord running the kingdom of Happy Valley. The actions, or more appropriately, the inactions of Penn State University's president, athletic director, and on down the chain of command, all very clearly evidence that they knew who was in charge at the university. And it wasn't them, and it wasn't the board of trustees. It was Joe Paterno. Paterno is ultimately proving to be one of the most dangerously selfish and self-serving people that have ever walked across the college sports landscape.
Yeah, when you thought Penn State, it was Joe Paterno. Absolutely right. I totally agree. So now let's look at the Penn State football program, because obviously now, in light of all of this, the football program is most likely going to be affected, and it's almost undoubtedly going to happen that the NCAA will intervene. Now, I never lived through that through this particular example I'm going to bring up, but people have commented that this blows the SMU slush fund scandal out of the water, and you lived through that, and you could probably name some, parallels between those two. Maybe this Penn State scandal would probably be worse, but when you look at the facts that are present in the Freeh Report, all the media's comments on the situation, how do you think the NCAA will respond in terms of punishing the Penn State football program?
Well, first of all, thank you for outing me on age and having knowledge of things that happened in the 70s and 80s.
Hey, I was only born in 89. So.
Well, to answer your question, as apparently an old person, I don't actually think the scandal currently has ruined the football program at all. In a weird, sickening twist, it seems like recruits, student athletes, and everybody else associated with Penn State University has entered into a group bunker mentality and used this entire tragedy as like a rallying point. It's somewhat sickening and brings back images, especially for old people like me, of, Jonestown, the Manson family, the Branch Davidians, and these other weird cult communities where the conduct of the people involved just seemed to make no apparent sense. That being said, I also don't know that there's any strong speculation that the NCAA will respond to this in any meaningful way. In fact, I think quite the opposite might be true, and I'm one of the people that is fearful or speculate that the NCAA might take the Pontius Pilate approach on this one and kind of wash their hands of the issue under the justification, and I'm making air quotes, that as horrible as the Sandusky matter was, no specific NCAA rules were violated. I honestly don't know how the NCAA is going to react to this, but I do know how I hope they react to this. The NCAA, at least in my opinion, and maybe less so in recent years, has been notorious for going after non-moving targets, like Native American mascots, and has also repeatedly given every indication that they are more desirous of making money than issuing appropriate penalties against blue-chip programs that might be bad for the overall business of the NCAA. That being said, the NCAA really needs to understand that this is the defining moment in the organization's entire existence. I mean, the defining moment.
Yeah.
And even if one could argue that this very nebulous, hazy, undefinable term of lack of institutional control may not apply to the actual rape of children by Jerry Sandusky for decades, it's got to apply to the cover-up and the ongoing enablement of this conduct on athletic department premises in association with an NCAA program by a head coach, a very powerful head coach, numerous assistant coaches, the athletic director, and the university president. The NCAA must send a message that what happened at Penn State is to never, ever happen again. While the SMU situation was notable for its blatant disregard of the rules, I mean, anybody that's seen the 30 for 30 movie and lived through it like us old people, it was a pretty dramatic set of circumstances that happened down in Texas, but I mean it pales miserably. I mean it's not even comparable when compared to the sanctioned and protected rape of children by a coach. To that end, I think the only appropriate penalty is the death penalty for Penn State's football program for at least 3 years, if not longer.
Okay.
I mean, if the NCAA came out and said, you know what, Penn State, you're done for football forever, fine. It's warranted.
Yeah, that's actually been a lot of talk about that. People have even, I think Stephen A. Smith actually said 5 years would be probably the most appropriate punishment. But to saddle off what you had mentioned earlier, yeah, there aren't really any rules in the NCAA handbook that allude to something like this, in terms of concealing information and whatnot. But let's say that the NCAA does, place a death penalty on the football program for X amount of years, however long it would be. But just based on, morality and what's happened in the news and whatnot, do you suspect at that point that the NCAA will undoubtedly, now revise a rule in their handbook to, alert schools about something like this from never happening again?
I don't necessarily think so. The one thing that the NCAA has been very consistent in doing is being inconsistent in enforcing its own rules. Mm-hmm. As such, I don't think that changing the rules is necessarily something that they want to do or even need to do. I think what they can do is, and the way you send a message is to enforce your rules that you already have. And I think they need to do it under the, if not the black and white letter, the spirit of the lack of institutional control. And I think if you hammer somebody with another death penalty, because the one thing that the SMU situation did show is that the death penalty does work. And I think that's part of the problem why the NCAA has been so fearful about using it again, is because, it's at some level it is the nuclear approach. Yeah. I mean, it works. I think by undertaking the penalties or the sanctions that I talked about a couple minutes ago, I think they would, without changing their specific rule book, give the rule book and the definition of lack of institutional control some teeth and put everybody on warning going forward that, something like this. And again, we have to remember that this, God willing, is only a once ever type of situation.
Yeah, totally agree.
This is a worst of. Where it becomes more of an issue is, lesser things, criminal conduct by athletes that might be covered up, or things of that nature where, it wasn't quite as egregious as this. That's where, but again, if you set the outside parameter, you can always come backwards from there.
Yeah, exactly. So this actually came out of the blue. I saw it on Twitter. Reports now are that Penn State University will remodel the showers in the Lash building where Jerry Sandusky raped multiple of his victims, many of his victims actually. And the ongoing discussion has been about whether or not the Joe Paterno statue should remain on Penn State grounds. So can you share your thoughts on that? Should the Penn State statue be removed from the stadium? And what do you think about the remodeling situation in the showers? What's your thought on that?
I saw the news on the remodeling of the showers in the Lash building, which is where a number of the Sandusky child rapes occurred. Mm-hmm. And I can only equate, remodeling those showers to giving Adolf Hitler a new haircut. Cosmetic, superficial changes don't change history or the evil that is embodied in a certain place. They want to do something meaningful, tear the whole darn building down. As regards, and again, I don't know if it's a big building or a small building. I really don't care. I mean, it's a place of evil at this point where a lot of kids lost the rest of their lives. As regard to the Paterno statue at the stadium, I've kind of gone back and forth on this one. My immediate reaction was that the statue should be taken down as quickly as they could get a bulldozer over to the stadium. However, I'm actually leaning now towards leaving the statue up as a reminder of what happened. We as a society shouldn't always look to whitewash or erase memories of past evils, but at some level to create monuments to those occurrences to serve as a reminder of what happened, and more importantly, to actually stimulate ongoing thought and discussion amongst those that come after us, so that we don't ignore Santayana's warning that those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Mm-hmm. This is something that should not be buried. This is something that needs to be kept out in the forefront as a warning and as a lesson to everybody, whether it's in sports, outside of sports, or what have you. It's not just about athletic departments. It's about, I think each of us is imbued with a duty to take care of people that can't take care of themselves. And if there's ever a time when there's a child being harmed or an old person or whatever, we need to take the responsibility, even if it is at personal cost, to make sure that person is protected.
Yeah, exactly. So finally, we know the images and the legacies of Penn State have been forever tarnished, most likely virtually irreparable, with respect to the administrators at least. But now looking at the school, the institution where students go and, study academics and, have a life for 4 years there. When you look at the football program, and let's even take it a step back. Let's look at all the athletics programs there, not just the football program. Let's look at the basketball program, maybe even down to the volleyball team if they have one. With what happened with the Sandusky scandal, do you think the school, the academic part of the school will have its image repaired? And also, what do you think of the athletic program's image? Will that also be repaired?
I don't even think we've began to see even the tip of the iceberg as far as the damage to Penn State University or its reputation. All we've seen really is the Sandusky conviction. And that's just lighting the fuse. Mm-hmm. Everything that's going to come after it. We have yet to see what the U.S. Department of Education is going to do with regard to violations of the Declaratory Act, which is a federal law that requires universities to report crimes and provide timely warnings if there's crimes that threaten the campus community. We haven't seen what the NCAA is going to do. We haven't seen what the Big Ten is going to do. The one thing that's kind of not somewhat underreported is, does the Big Ten say, you know what, you're really not what we want in our conference? Further, we haven't even scratched the surface of further criminal charges, mm-hmm. all the civil suits that are going to be forthcoming, and otherwise. Yeah. I honestly don't know, but my suspicion is that they will not recover from this. In any event, whatever remedial measures they take to fix their reputation, there's no way that Penn State can enjoy anywhere near the same reputation, athletically or otherwise, that it enjoyed before the unveiling of recent events. The one example that does come to mind, and again, it's horrible things for different reasons, was the shooting of 4 students by National Guardsmen at Penn State in 1970. Mm-hmm. This event happened 42 years ago, and whenever I hear Kent State, the first thing I think of is students being shot by National Guardsmen. Right. I'm pretty sure that's not what they want on their promotional brochures.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's just what's going to stick in my mind. And now that one I can date myself a little more positively and say I wasn't even born yet.
Right.
But for people that lived through a circumstance, I mean, it's like the Daily Plaza down in Dallas where Kennedy got shot, or where anything terrible happens. That's going to be the impression of that university, and it doesn't matter all the good things that happened at Penn State University. This 2 decades, in my opinion, probably will, irreparably harm the university to some level.
That's something, yeah, and quite frankly, I think that, this academic reputation, will be something, even the athletics program too, the image for all Penn State will really take a really, really long time to repair, and of course, a lot of details have yet to be revealed about what happened with Curley, Spanier, and Schultz. Much more will come out. But Scott, great talking about the Freeh Report in Penn State. You've been on it, and of course, for all our viewers, you can follow Scott down below in the description box. And Scott, thank you for being on Law and Batting Order.
It's my pleasure, Tony. Have a great weekend.
You too. That's the show. Leave all your comments down below, and be sure to visit Law and Batting Order at lawandbattingorder.com, as well as on Facebook and Twitter. Until next time, have a great week, guys.